Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for joining us for our panel, Classic Preservation or Reinterpretation. In just a few moments, we're going to dive into a really great discussion. And I want to begin by introducing our moderator, who we're very lucky to have here today, Chris Gialanella. In 2001, hey, Chris.
Hey.
Chris found his passion in the publishing business while working for titles such as Angelino and Front Desk. And through all his dedication and hard work, he was promoted to take over for Riviera Orange County in 2008 and was given a chance to publish its sister magazine, Riviera San Diego. He is currently the group publisher for 8 brands in Southern California, including Angelino, Los Angeles Confidential, Riviera Orange County, Modern Luxury San Diego, Interiors California, Modern Luxury Beverly Hills, and Modern Luxury Palm Springs. How he does it all, I have no idea. But Chris, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Thank you, Christine. I don't know how I do it either, but someone has to do it, right?
That's right.
Anyway, I'm thrilled to be here. Christine and I go back. We've known each other for so many years. I've been with Modern Luxury for 20 years, believe it or not. I started back in 2000 and literally, earned my keep over the 20 years. And when I first started, I literally would call on home design stores up and down Beverly Boulevard. So I got to know all the home design people on La Cienega, Beverly, Robertson. So it was a really, really great opportunity for a young guy like me who was in his 30s at the time to meet such wonderful, iconic people in the design industry. So I'm thrilled to be here. We're talking about classic preservation and reinterpretation. Obviously, LA is known for some of the most historic, iconic architecture. I remember when I first moved here back in 1994, I would drive around Beverly Hills and Hancock Park and the Hollywood Hills and say, wow, it's so nostalgic looking at some of these homes and you feel like you're almost going back in time. So I decided to wear my 1992 shirt that I bought when I first moved here, when I would swing dance at the Brown Derby, another iconic building in town. So this is what I'm wearing if anyone's wondering what on earth is this guy wearing. But anyway, that's what I'm wearing. So I'm thrilled to be here and we've got some great talented people in the design industry here. So I will quickly say hello to Lorcan O'herlihy. Say hello.
Hello there.
He's the principal of Lorcan O'herlihy Architecture. Richard Loring, who's a director of design and construction for Domos Co-Living. Hey, Richard.
How are you doing?
Good, good. And last but not least, I wanted to kind of do a call out in our recent issue of Angelino. We've got the most powerful, influential people. We've got Jaime Rummerfield and Ron Woodson right here in the magazine. Hello, guys.
Hi there.
Hello.
Thanks for being here. So,
thanks for having us.
Yeah. So I'll start with you, Jaime and Ron. Jaime, tell us a little bit about yourself and what's cooking in your world.
Well, hi there. Nice to see everybody. We are a design duo, Ron Woodson and me. We have been partners for 18 years here in Los Angeles doing residential interior design all over town. And we have many wonderful clients and have been lucky enough to see some of the most beautiful properties in Los Angeles. And over the years, we've witnessed so many of them disappear. And we decided, don't worry, I'm not being arrested. That's a police car going by. Welcome to LA. And so, yeah, we have decided to, about 4 years ago, we started a nonprofit called Save Iconic Architecture because LA is known for world-class architecture. And I think a lot of people just don't know that.
I agree. I feel like, when I first moved to LA, I did the Star Maps tour. I think everyone has to kind of initiate themselves into LA. But now, architecture has really taken on a whole new meaning. Obviously, tourists are coming here and really checking out some of the most beautiful places in town that are still up, like, the Eames House and the Gamble House and Greystone, some iconic places. And even when you fly into LA, you see the beautiful theme building at LAX that Paul Revere Williams did, which is unbelievable. So it's kind of like the minute you land, you see it right away. Ron, tell us about you. How have you been?
I've been great. I have to ditto what my business partner said. She gave an overview of both our design firm and our nonprofit foundation. of which we founded because we were lucky enough to have clients in this rarefied era that could afford and to be able to purchase these types of homes. And we were finding that so many of them were saying, oh, you know, I bought this Paul Williams, I bought this Wallace Neff, but it's too small, I'm gonna tear it down. And we just thought this is a total travesty and something had to be done. And so that was why we formed SIA. And we, again, we've been lucky enough in our design firm to be able to work on so many of these beautiful homes with wonderful clients who do appreciate them. So.
And behind you, tell us what we're looking at behind you.
Well, you're looking at the former Ava Gabor Estate in Holmby Hills that was designed by Paul Williams. And that was completely intact. Several other celebrities lived there. Mia Farrow and Frank Sinatra, when they first got married, they lived in the house. And a lot of other noteworthy celebrities lived in the house. And we got a chance to view the house right after the owners that bought it from the Ava Gabor Estate, who really tried to keep it intact. And then they sold it to an overzealous developer. And he wanted to build a spec house on the property. And so it is now, if you take a look at Jaime's background, that's what the house looks like now. And this is a huge, huge problem in Los Angeles. You know, we have some of the most noteworthy architecture next door to one another. There aren't many places, I don't think there are any others around the country, and I would venture to guess the world, where you could have a Wallace Neff next door to a Paul Williams next door to a Richard Meyer, all working seamlessly together. And our history is so small in the first place. Los Angeles is a young city, and our history is being torn down in record numbers. And so we're trying to add a spotlight, bring awareness, education, and landmarking to these properties. And it's a big undertaking, but we feel like it had to be done.
And just as a side note, Chris, this building was under the landmarking review process. Our organization, which is a nonprofit, we proactively nominate and submit the landmarking nominations for properties like this. And it was under review with the city, and this developer illegally demolished, they defaced the front, which is all the Paul Williams detailing, so that it wouldn't comply with the review board, the Cultural Heritage Commission's review board, because now, according to them, this doesn't meet its criteria. And so the developer got a slap on the wrist for defacing and ruining a state treasure by Paul Williams. And it's very sad to see that happen at such a low level.
That's awful. And it seems to happen quite a lot, you know, so it's not the only one, you know, so we'll get back to that. But, you know, speaking of architects, Lorcan O'herlihy, hello. Tell us about what you've been up to lately. You there? Uh-oh. I think you're on mute.
Yeah, he's muted. Yeah.
Sorry about that. So yes, very fortunate to be busy in this day and age, this particular period. My practice has been around for about 30 years. Started late 80s, early 90s, and started early on with classic scenario for young architects, houses and small retail. But of recent, over the last 10 or 15 years, jump scale. I was always fascinated by cities, so my work is primarily in urban centers like Los Angeles, Detroit, among others. And that has been the focus of our work. It's been the culture and the ecology of what exists in cities. And we have about 35 projects, a variety of scales in different cities. We're very busy in Detroit, and quite obviously in Los Angeles, among other cities. We have work in Sacramento and Vancouver and other cities. So we've kind of expanded our bandwidth, so to speak. But primarily what drives our work is we see architecture as a social act, that's our role to do work of consequence as architects. So we tackle every single project to bring that aspect to the work of to buildings and other projects. So something that I've always been committed to and focused on, and we've been fortunate to have great clients like Richard Loring in the past. So we were able to be able to apply those ideas with, of course, great clients. And it's always about that, a marrying of kindred spirits, so to speak. So, but yes, we're very busy. We're doing quite a different projects all over the place. What's interesting also about this particular period and also relevant to this particular project is a recognition how valuable it is and how important housing is, and how you must use the housing that exists as well, and most certainly when it's a historical landmark like this. So we were really honored to be able to do this project. And but yes, this represents, in my opinion, the future. It's how to work with the housing supply that exists right now and work with buildings and be able to create good solutions between old and new, and how you respect what's there, but look to the future.
And Lorcan, that project behind you, is that the Habitat 825?
Yes, it's a project that I did with Richard a number of years ago. I'm always grateful for him to hire me to do this project. Yes, it's a very important project. It's it started at a period in Los Angeles where there's great need for housing, and this project came about. And of course, the efforts here were to recognize the value of the Schindler House, but to celebrate it in such a way, not necessarily the style of it, but the bigger ideas, the social agency that was in that house, the nature of materiality, the aspects of shared spaces. So all those ideas that was embedded in this house, as you know, there were two families living in this house. So we applied that idea to the project. And so it was larger ideas that we brought to the table. And we're very cautious and conscious of the fact that we didn't want to cast shadows in the Schindler House, a very essential move. So we dropped the building 15 feet from 45 feet to 30 feet so that there were no shadows cast on the Schindler House. And that was one of the key critical issues to it. So that among others.
And obviously social, economic, political issues as well in doing something like that as well. Have you experienced anything on that nature with this project?
On the one you're talking about, the one we're doing around Rossmoor, is referring to.
Right.
Yeah, there's a balance. Sorry, balance of both. It really is about that. It's about how do you understand the social aspects, and I'm convinced this solution's a great solution because we're able to come up with an idea about stepping back the massing to activate the roofs as outdoor spaces. So that's so essential in this day and age. The project being a co-living project, it makes great sense to provide inside outside spaces. And quite obviously the existing building had the ground plane, but didn't really have that. But we're trying to add that to it, which is a social agency that we're bringing to the project. So there's a really interesting step there where what we're bringing to the table is contributing to the building and pushing it forward in terms of what we need to do with buildings in the future.
And we could segue into Richard. Richard, welcome. Tell us about yourself and what you've been up to.
Well, I've been up to no good, Chris. Well, let me start at the beginning, okay? I absolutely fell in love with architecture when I was in elementary school, which was a long time ago. And that love of architecture, I think over the years has actually only increased. You know, it's a lifelong passion now. And I actually went to architecture school, both undergraduate and graduate school at University of Michigan. So I did work in the profession for about 4 or 5 years after graduating. And then also decided to try my hand at building too, because I also love construction as an activity. So I was able to combine those two passions. And then back around 2000, 2001, I had the opportunity to do some development. So I've been able to get myself in trouble in all three endeavors. And, so I'm 43 years into my career, and I was very, very fortunate. I met Lorcan, I think, almost 30 years ago. So we've known each other a very long time, and when we've worked together, particularly on our multifamily projects, because I think both Lorcan and I are, also very passionate about housing. But we've had an amazing collaboration on our housing projects. And I think both of us are very, very proud of the work that we've produced over the last 18 years, which brings us to now and brings us to 410 Rossmoor, which the building is from 1930. It was a very traditional multi-housing project. The company that I work with now decided to purchase the property and reimagine it. So we have reimagined the property. It's a combination of co-living and traditional apartments. It's about a 40-60 split, 40% co-living, 60% of the units are going to remain traditional. And we, when I say we, I'm talking about Lorcan and I and the companies that we represent, accepted the challenge of trying to figure out how do you repurpose a 90-year-old building and also add square footage to it so that it was a financially viable project, something that could then be brought into the 21st century. So again, we're taking a building that was worn out, and that's putting it mildly, and we're doing a seismic retrofit, redoing all the life safety systems and adding 4 stories on top of an existing 5-story building. And we've had to deal with a lot of different stakeholders. We've had neighborhood groups, we've had tenant rights associations that we've been working with. The preservation community certainly is following the progress. They're looking over our shoulder, trying to see what we're up to. And obviously both Lorcan and I are committed modernists. So we've, decided that we needed to find a way to put a modern piece of architecture on top of a, circa 1930 building. And I, we worked very hard. We went through a lot of different schematic design
iterations.
Iterations.
Yes.
Yeah, we really looked into this. I mean, we did a lot of work to get to where we're at, and I think both Lorcan and I are exceedingly proud of.
When's the project starting?
Construction is supposed to start in May of 2021, and we've got about somewhere between a 20 and a 22-month construction duration.
Right.
When that happens,
I just want to jump in here, just to have a conversation moment with Richard. Richard, would you agree that this particular project was immensely complicated, because not only were we adding above, but we had to deal with, as you say, an enormous complexity with the existing structure, how to retrofit that, but also how do you stitch the cores up vertically? How do we make sure that the mix between the co-living and the traditional units all work? So there was a lot of complexity in this project. And behind Richard, you can see the project. So there is a nice, interesting kind of balance between old and new, but we were also wanting to, from the relationship from the city or from the street, was to take the lines and proportions of the existing building and have in a sense, a kind of weave those ideas into the architecture above. And that was very important. But it's been a very challenging but exciting project.
Ditto that.
Ditto, yes.
Exciting, exciting. Ron and Jaime, you guys have been together for 30 years. Do you know everything there is to know about each other?
18.
Oh, 18?
18 years. I'm only 30.
I hear
So
you.
that's the part too, yeah. No, we've been together 18 years.
That's amazing. You guys had your store on, was it on Melrose, I believe?
No, we were on La Cienega and
Cienega.
Melrose Place for 6 years.
Rummerfield's House of Design.
Yes.
Wow. And then how have you seen your careers that led you guys to become advocates for preserving architecture's history, and how did you create the nonprofit?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, we're very, very lucky to be able to have clients that could have these homes and afford these homes and to hire us. And we've worked on a number of these, and it's been, you know, a great honor to have been a native Angelino, which I'm very proud of. And I love the history of this town. And, you know, I love Hollywood. The whole glamour and lure of Hollywood is very important to me. My dad was a jazz musician, and so I got a chance to be in some of these homes from a very, very early age. And I think that sparked my interest in architecture, and particular type of architecture. I mean, really grand architecture. And so cut, you know, 20 some years later, 30 years later, Jaime and I, when we got together, we had the same sensibilities from day one. And she's from Los Angeles also. I won't talk too much for her, but we both love our city. And we had this love of architecture. So that's where it started. And we were seeing some developers who weren't as conscious as Richard and Lorcan, just want to desecrate total neighborhoods. I mean, you drive through some of the neighborhoods in West Hollywood now, and it just is a mismatch of these big ugly boxes that, you know, don't work in the neighborhood, and cheap architecture, and it's heartbreaking because the whole neighborhood is changing, and not for the better. And
well,
so,
Ron, Ron, there is hope in the future, because we're actually doing a project on St. Andrews in Los Angeles. It's a supportive housing project. There was an existing nice house there in the front, and in the old days, there would be the nonprofit developer, and the city would want to tear it down and build as many units as possible there. But we're actually using the existing house and stitching in 4 units in there, and we're adding 16 in the back, but we're preserving what's there. So I do believe that what you guys do is so essential in the city, because the future is about that. It's about utilizing what's there. And as the city changes, is it possible conceivably to be able to use projects like that, where it's an existing single family home, but if there's a need for housing, can one use the existing house and creatively change it, but keep the spirit of what's there, and the heart and soul of what's there? And that's what we're doing in one of our projects. So it's interesting, the future of housing in Los Angeles will be preserving what's there and working with the housing capacity that's there. It's kind of interesting.
And it should be. And adaptive reuse is key. And, you know, this is where I think it's lazy on the part of some developers, because, you know, they just want to rip down what was there, when you could really incorporate, like you're saying, what was there and enhance it. And, you know, bring about what you want to do with housing, the housing issue.
And also, you know, understanding, like doing your homework of the neighborhoods. I think so many developments don't even understand the narrative of the neighborhood and the culture within that neighborhood and LA's story. There's so much to all these different patches of this quilt of LA. And when you keep tearing it apart and you know, you have nothing. And so our Hollywood heritage is so rich, and there's so much, so many amazing, fantastical stories. And when these structures are gone, whether they're large estates or, you know, courtyard apartments, those stories go away with them. And the more that we can incorporate and preserve our history, the stronger we are in the arts. Where, you know, the world looks to us for fashion, film, art, design, and let's not let it be lost on architecture.
So true. It's funny. I was talking to Patty and Hans Rockenwagner, who own Dear John's. Have you guys been to Dear John's in Culver City? It was an old school bar that Frank Sinatra bought for someone on the set of one of his movies back in the days, who can go there after he was filming. And, you know, literally Frank Sinatra had owned it and bought it for this individual. Well, years later, Hans and Patty bought the restaurant, bought the bar, and they turned it into an Italian restaurant. And it's actually phenomenal, but it's, you know, they have 2 more years and the property is going to be, you know, knocked down. And so I was saying to Patty, well, what if you picked up the building and moved it? I mean, back in the day, you could actually do things like that. So, I mean, you're right, Jaime, this is all happening. But what can we do as citizens of LA and Southern California to sort of help put a stop to this?
Chris, can I speak to this point?
Of course.
Okay. I think there's several things to remember. First of all, we live in one of the largest cities in the world. You know, it's a major metropolitan area. Cities change. And none of us would want the city to just kind of stop and be frozen in amber forever and ever. So there's going to be change. The question is, you know, how does that change occur, and what are some of the ground rules for the change? And one of the things that's always, I guess, bothered me is the kind of the lack of civic support required to preserve neighborhoods or preserve individual buildings or streets. This is the job of government, okay? This is not the job or solely the job of individual citizens. It's just not. And if, you know, I consider myself a preservationist, but I also understand full well that, you know, governments, whether it's local, state, or federal, they have to come forward and help with preservation efforts. You cannot expect private property owners to shoulder the entire responsibility or financial burden for this. So it's great to lobby for these things and to support these causes, but at the end of the day, you need to apply pressure to government. That's where the pressure, the bulk of the pressure ought to be aimed. So that's what I got to say about that.
Richard, my thoughts are the building that we're doing, 410 Rossmoor, I believe, could be a catalyst. If one can show that you can keep existing buildings and preserve great buildings, but still, given as cities change, the need changes, the need for more housing, and that you don't need to eminent domain, wipe it out and build a vertical tower. You can conceivably work with what's there as long as it's done well and intelligently. And I believe what we're trying to do here is that. So it could conceivably be. Sorry,
yeah,
go on.
Lorcan, you're right. In some cases, you know, private entities can make this work. And what we're hoping is that Rossmoor is one of those cases. There are other situations where it doesn't work.
Right.
You know,
of course.
you do need public support to help preserve and protect an old building or a historic street or a commercial structure. Right. So there's no one answer, admittedly.
Yeah, I'm convinced that if a project like this, sometimes it takes leaders or people to try something like what we're doing in the city. The government supports it, and then they become advocates for it. I remember you and I did a pocket park in West Hollywood where that was not the case where you keep the existing house, but we gave back the city a pocket park and a public park on private land. Concept is very interesting. Can you do it? Can you put a public pocket park on private land and make it work? And I know that a year and a half later, I believe it was Viragos at the time, correct me if I'm wrong, but he came up with this plan of action, 50 pocket parks throughout the city of LA. Now we did it in West Hollywood, which is clearly easier than the city of LA. City of LA is an enormous behemoth place. But and that scenario is possibly that individuals like your good self who are driving these type of projects can be a catalyst for the city to say, that's how we need to do it. We are going to back that and support. And that's my thoughts. It could have worked. I don't think Viragos ended up doing 50 pocket parks, just for the record, but it was a good concept.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many classic estates in LA. I mean, like Pickfair, for example, you know, was demolished, you know, Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks. I mean, like Ron and Jaime, what properties would you like that have been demolished and you'd like to see come back in a way? If you were on Fantasy Island and they said, we're going to bring these properties back to LA, which ones would you want to see come back? or
I
not
think
restored?
I think Pick Fair is a good start. And, you know, that was torn down because they thought the house was haunted. Pia Zadora thought the house was haunted. It's interesting how other celebrities have actually torn down very notable architecture, I think, out of ignorance. But you've got the Wallace Neff Enchanted Hill that was torn down, and still an empty lot called Enchanted Hill. And that was a gorgeous, sprawling Spanish estate. I wish still existed. And I think that there's a number of Paul Williams that are gone now, including the Chasins estate, which was owned by a friend of ours. And the person who bought it promised they wouldn't tear it down. And shortly thereafter, it was gone. And we have photos of all of this. We've documented so many beautiful homes that have been demolished. And to watch even just in Hancock Park adjacent, where you don't have an HPOZ, which is a historic overlay protection zone, basically it's still the Wild West here in Los Angeles. We don't have a mandate on preservation at all. We hardly have a city historian, really. Our Office of Historic Resources just opened in 2006, and they have 2 employees that oversee all the preservation efforts in the city. And it's very backed up. And we just landmarked a Richard Neutra, and it took over a year. And I just think it's true. Richard is correct. It's governance. It's taking pride in our city from a city standpoint and really beefing up the flagging of these parcels that we all know are notable, but no one's mentioning them. No one's flagging them. When you go for a demolition permit, they don't care. They don't look at the name of who is the architect or who does this have a pedigree. It's just a parcel number in the building and safety department. So we are really working hard to bridge that information into the city documentation process when it comes to reviewing for permits.
Love that. Ron, how about yourself? Which properties are near and dear to your heart?
That have been torn
That have
down?
been torn down or
God.
on the verge of being torn down?
Well, again, a lot of the Paul Williams, again, like Jaime was saying, I think one of the ones that was near and dear to my heart, because I spent a lot of time in the house with the previous owners, was the Chasins estate. It was one of the very few mid-century homes that Paul Williams designed. And he designed it in total tandem with the Chasins. They wanted this house to be and have a certain look, and they wanted, you know, he was the architect to the stars. And when that house was built, it was right at the time that, you know, he was building these houses for every major celebrity in Beverly Hills and Bel Air, Holmby Hills. And this house was so good. It was, and it would have been the type of house that if you had to add on to it, it was a big house in I think it was about 8,000 square feet. If you had to add on to it, you could have done that without tearing it down and still made it a beautiful home. But it just, the mindset of some of these people that just feel like new is so much better than what was already there is that mentality is just, and so many of these people do it in secrecy. So many of these houses are behind gates. The general public will never see them, never know that they're there. And, but as history goes on, once they're gone forever. And that part of that history is gone forever. So that's one of my major ones. I mean, we literally, the previous owners, she now lives in West Hollywood, and from her new house, we could see the demolition happening just on the hill. And it was just heartbreaking. And
are they
again,
educated about what's happening, or they just don't care, or they just feel, like you said, new is better? And is architecture
both. So many, you know, and I don't want to, you know, I don't want to sound disparaging, but a lot of people who have new money are not educated. They're ignorant to to architecture. And this is the topic we're talking about. And they just feel like, you know, I got to have the new and latest and greatest. And
we
Los
say,
Angeles,
go buy something else. Don't buy this house.
Right.
Not for
And
you.
going back to what Richard was saying, I mean, the city and the civics of our city, if that was more to the forefront, we wouldn't have this problem. You can't go, you know, think about, you know, other places around the world. You couldn't go to Mayfair in London and say, oh, you know, I don't like these, so I'm just going to tear it down. That would not happen. They have huge overlays. They have tiers of what you can do and how you can redevelop those houses, those row houses in London. And there are other places around the country even that still, they look at us and go, wow, it's heartbreaking. It's amazing that you guys can just tear your city apart like that.
And Lorcan, you do work in Detroit. Are you seeing the same thing happening there, or is it worse in Los Angeles?
With regards to preservation, you're talking about?
Yeah.
We were selected twice by the city of Detroit to do. One was a 6 square mile study of an area called Northwest Detroit. And in that particular area, there were over 2,000 single family homes, of which were either abandoned, burned out, or in extreme disrepair. And our task with the city was to find which ones we could preserve and restore, which ones that were too far gone. So yes, we did a 6-month study with the city, calibrating that whole part of the city to find out which we should keep. We also tackled the issue of schools. Schools were, sadly, public school was collapsing in Detroit over the years, and charter schools started to take over, which was not a good thing because the public school went south, so to speak. And so we had these derelict buildings, beautiful buildings that were in place. So we also worked with the city to analyze what would be the right potential tenants for that new building, of which it was senior housing. So we took a number of schools and reformulated into senior housing. That's a project we're working on right now. We also know in the residential areas and in the neighborhoods of Detroit, in the outskirts, we're also looking at bringing new programs in there where if one house, the issue of homeless is less about the issue of poverty. Detroit's about the issue of lack of resources, not necessarily homelessness, because there's quite a few houses that are empty. So what's interesting is we're also bringing libraries and other programs to houses in the area to activate the area, as opposed to the old school where Detroit used to be about the car and about moving and driving, meaning that if you had to go get some food, you had to get in your car and drive to the store. But we're actually stitching into this community neighborhood grocery stores, neighborhood libraries, and all those others. And we're using existing houses there. So yes, there is a commitment to that. And also downtown Detroit has got some extraordinary buildings downtown. Albert Kahn is a great architect who did some significant buildings in Detroit. So a number of those have been restored by one of my clients, a gentleman named Dan Gilbert. He owns Bedrock. And Bedrock is a development company that has moved back to Detroit to try to help restore it. And they're doing a good job. They've had a great 6 years, but they hit a wall recently economically. But they will get through this. But yes, that does exist in Detroit and multiple layers.
Back to LA, and then we could get on another tangent. Obviously hotels, I adore the Sunset Tower, which was, I believe, the Argyle prior. I don't know, Richard, what hotels or commercial buildings would you like to see preserved or, not touched in today's world?
I think downtown is probably an interesting place to talk about because we still have a we still have a treasure trove of beautiful commercial buildings down there. And it's interesting, Chris, that you brought it up because one of the ways that you could help preserve those buildings is develop a system of development rights and air rights or tax credits. There are a lot of mechanisms that the city could employ to make sure that the pressure to take down some of these old buildings is abated, the financial pressure. And you could do that through the sale of development rights, air rights, or like I said, tax credits, or bonds, city issued bonds on a project at some other location. So there's plenty of tools that you can put into the toolbox. But again, coming back to the main point here is it takes an enlightened city to do it. It takes an enlightened city government and people that have the controls in the city to start to think in these terms. They do it in other cities, and we should be doing it here. So again, I see it more as a civic responsibility, not so much an individual responsibility, but a civic responsibility.
What role does a real estate agent have in this situation? Are they educated? Are they for the buyer? Are they for the for the seller?
They're not educated.
They're for the commission. They're for their commission.
They're the absolute worst.
Yeah, our real estate agents need to educate themselves on design and architecture.
Yeah.
They are very misleading in what they say to people. Their recommendations are very ill-informed and not mindful to architecture at all. And when it comes to open floor plans, let's blow out this room, it's really negligent to be giving advice like that, especially on notable properties. And if you're using the notoriety or pedigree of a property to sell it, then I sure hope you're behind saving it as well, because most people abandon the properties immediately once they've sold it, and it gets torn down as they turn their back to it. And it's not a fundamental way to do business as far as mindful design and to uplift our city. Is horrible for the environment, all this demolition and rebuilding. And I think if people were to educate themselves more, they would really value the architecture that we have and the stories that they tell.
That's great. I believe we have
interesting.
Go ahead, Ron.
We met with, just very quickly, we met with some agents on a panel that we did in Dallas. And this woman spoke at length with us, who was a real estate agent. And real estate agents in Texas, they have to go through a rigorous program of learning about architecture. Now, whether they're following it is one thing, but they have to know about all types of architecture when they're selling it. You don't have to do that here. And it's sad. We have these insane shows that are on cable networks about selling properties and and just to hear what these people say, it's just cringeworthy. It's horrible.
Richard, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of piggyback off something that Jaime mentioned, which I think is really important. We live in an age where everybody supposedly is very aware of climate change and, preservation of resources and things like that. And of course, far and away, the best thing you can do is save buildings that can be used.
Save a house.
And repurpose them or whatever. I mean, that saves an enormous amount of energy and resources. And that should always be part of the conversation whenever you're talking about preservation. It's not the main part, but it should be a part of the conversation.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Let me bring Christine back. I believe we have some questions from the audience. Hey, Christine.
Hey there. Nice to be back. It's a great conversation, by the way. We have several questions that came in for all of you, and I chose one for each person. So let's start with Ron and Jaime. If you could choose an LA landmark that is very significant right now for saving, and I know you've got lots on your plate, both of you, if you could only just choose one, what would it be and why?
Ladies first.
I mean, there are so many, but one that we've been watching a lot is the house behind me. It's called Owlwood by Robert Farquhar. He's the architect of the California Club, Beverly Hills High School, Beverly Hills City Hall, and many other notable estates. And this was the beginning of Holmby Hills, and it still exists, and it has quite the legacy not only for its history, but its Hollywood heritage as well, which is, it was owned by Tony Curtis, and Sonny and Cher lived there. And it's seen, if these walls could talk, it would be pretty incredible. And so it is not landmark protected. It's under the City of LA jurisdiction, which is Paul Corrett's office, the city council member. And we have been working with his city planners. When I first contacted them about this house, they weren't even aware this house existed. And so it is under quite a litigation right now with its owner. And so we can't landmark it until it's clear of that, but we are poised and ready. And it's something that should not be demolished. There's a lot of people who want to alter it, add onto it. It's 18,000 square feet. It's perfect the way it is. And some things you should just let it be, because they're just perfect as they were meant to be.
We wish you luck on that monumental project. That's really important. I'm glad you mentioned it. Christopher Lorcan, what are two of your favorite multifamily housing projects that you created? And tell us why you feel they've received such acclaim.
Okay. I love them all. Each one has a very unique story behind it. So anytime I can contribute to good architecture to the city, I feel good. So to pick two though, I would say one of the ones I did with Richard, which is Formosa 1140. It's a red and orange building. That to me was a very important project from a number of reasons. It was, again, in terms of this idea that you could produce a building, but also give back to the city in the framework of a pocket park, which we did, which was, again, a public park and private land. That was an interesting story. I'll make it very brief, but there was an existing structure on that property. The city initially wanted us to keep it, but that building was not worth keeping. It was a crack house. It was boarded up. It was not, the neighborhood wanted it out. So we went back to the city and said, look, we can't keep this house, but we can give you a park. And ultimately they bought the idea and they liked it. So the idea that collectively we could work, both client, architect, and the city to provide the 45 by 100 square foot space for a park, and the city spent $500,000 and got it designed and maintains it, and they built it. So that was an interesting project. So it was a larger story, which is about having a park on a public park and private land for the whole community. That's one. Let me think of another one. Oh boy.
Question about the UCLA building. So.
Oh yeah, well, I can talk about that. That also was a very complex one, and also dealt with the idea of preservation, where we had a significant project next door called the Stratford Apartments, very important nurture project. And on that one, it was very challenging. It spent a number of years in not in litigation, but opposition between people living in the Stratford apartment, including Michael Webb, who was, of course, a prominent journalist. He was very much opposed to the existing 6-story structure they were going to place across the street on Strathmore. Ultimately, long story short is it was appealed. The approval that was eventually given was appealed, went to, I think, the Superior Court. And it was fascinating enough. I believe the judge decided, you know what, this architecture, this building does not reflect quality, enough quality to be next to the Strathmore Apartments. And he threw it out. So to the developer's credit, he then interviewed 5 architects, of which I was one of them. I ended up landing it. And that particular project turned out to be a really exciting project for me too. It had all the semblance of building next to a historical landmark, dropping the massing or the scale of the building to 2 stories, where this 2-story stepped building on Neutra was. So that was very important. And we pushed the density or the rest of the building to 7 stories to a part of the site that was next to 6 to 7-story buildings. And very, very proud of that project as well. So there you go. Those 2 would work for me. But both of them were interesting because the second one was also equally interesting because each one of the roofs were outdoor common open spaces. They're basically gardens on each one of the 6 levels. So and yes.
You go to UCLA to look for this building, to position it, because I've seen it many times, is it's very near the, it's near Strathmore, basically.
It's on Strathmore and Levering, yes.
Yes, and you can look for kind of a yellow and white architecture contemporary. It's provocative as can be. It's really interesting. So right. This question is for you, Richard. What is the most challenging yet rewarding aspect of reinventing a classic building?
So we're talking about Rossmoor.
I would take that, sure.
Well, I think the you have to make a series of decisions right or you should be making a series of decisions at the inception of the project, and those decisions are really critical. And I think the one decision that our company made was to adopt and embrace the Secretary of the Interior standards for historic preservation. I think that was a key decision. I'm very happy we did that because it has produced a project that I think is unique. I'm sure there are other large commercial buildings that have additions on the top, but I don't think there are too many of them. Certainly not too many in Los Angeles. And I think that adopting the Secretary of Interior standards was a very powerful influence on the form and the approach, the architectural approach that Lorcan's office has taken. But extraordinarily complicated because we have we have to do seismic upgrades. We have to upgrade the staircases and elevators and all the life safety systems. So there's just so much going on in the project. And you have to weave it all together into a coherent whole. So I think in terms of complexity, this is probably the most complicated project I've ever been involved in from a design and engineering perspective.
Okay, but you'll have a bundle of knowledge afterwards.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'll figure out a way to monetize that, huh?
Yeah.
Richard, now that you've done this, you'll get, and all you'll be tackling for future, it will be projects like this.
That's okay.
Ready. Chris, I got a question for you too.
Me? Oh,
you
okay.
guys, you do so much in publishing, and the one I guess that we all read all the time because it's here in town is Angelino. What can we look forward to reading and seeing in the upcoming issues, especially around holiday time? What have you got planned?
So we've got our Palm Springs issue will be mailed out with the November issue of Angelino, which is our philanthropy issue. And then December, we're doing a double month, December-January issue, which is our arts issue. And then we're also celebrating everything women. So our dynamic women of Los Angeles will be in there as well. And obviously we have award season coming up, which is taking on a different turn with the awards shows and lack of events. So we're going to be celebrating the Oscars in a unique way. So we're kind of interested to see how that looks. But yeah, we're still doing pretty well. And honestly, it's kind of like old is new for us. Print is strong. People are reading the magazines more than ever. They're getting them in their homes. So I think the longer everyone spends time in their homes, they're reading the magazine. So I'm proud of my team for making it happen.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. Chris, thank you so much for hosting and moderating today. We so appreciate it.
That was fun.
Incredible discussion. Thank you, Jaime and Ron, for coming and talking about all the projects that are so much in need and all the good work you're doing. We so appreciate it and thank you. And Lorcan and Richard.
Also, Christine, there's a couple more questions we're seeing come through.
Yeah, we have Reggie is talking about, are you seeing what I'm seeing? Reggie Sully had questions.
Yes,
Oh, yes, he
our
did.
friend
Okay.
Reggie. Hi, Reggie.
Why can't LA City Buildings and Safety enact the same ordinance that Beverly Hills Building and Safety has? Anytime an owner applies for a demolition permit, the property has to go through a historical review board prior to issuing of the permit.
A good question. We asked the same question to the city of LA. The Beverly Hills Preservation Board, their commission is really coming along. They just started in 2011. Can you believe they didn't even have a preservation commission in Beverly Hills? And they have almost 40 landmarks, which is a great start. And I think the momentum should keep going. And yes, they are really cracking down on the review process because we've lost so many. And I think it's important for the city of LA to follow suit and really work together. The city of Beverly Hills is a small postage stamp, their jurisdiction within the big, bubble of LA. And so I would love it if the city of LA did the same thing.
Great. Thank you, Reggie, for your question and for watching. Anyway, everybody, thank you so much. We're a little bit out of time, unfortunately, but we had a few more questions, but I think we covered the basics. And I just, again, Richard, thank you for coming, and Lorcan and everybody. It was a fabulous conversation. We look forward to having to continue, and I hope we can do a part 2 with all of you sometime.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And
Thank
one other thing that very quickly that Reggie asked was, he spoke about a couple of owners who have really saved and stepped up to the plate, and we just want to recognize those individuals. And Richard, you're one of them, and Lorcan, and several other people in town that are really stepping up to save these historic properties in Los Angeles. So we want to thank them. It's not all gloom and doom.
It's all good. Thank you.
Get on the train.
Thanks, Jaime.
Join us.
Right. Nice to see you all.
Thank you all.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Till our next
Good
chat.
job, everybody. Good job, everybody.